Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today we're jumping straight into all the high-stakes action heading into the second and final test match between the West Indies and Pakistan. We're heading over to the iconic Queen's Park Oval in Port of Spain, Trinidad, and let me tell you, the stage is perfectly set for an absolute thriller this Sunday.
So, can Pakistan actually survive this Caribbean fortress? That's the overarching question we're all asking ourselves right now. The narrative here couldn't possibly be more dramatic. We've got a highly ascendant home team playing with just total, absolute confidence, squaring off against a wounded, desperate opponent that is fighting tooth and nail to salvage their overseas campaign.
All right, here's how we're going to break this down today. First, the ultimate test match stakes. 2, the West Indies building a fortress. 3, Pakistan's collapse and injury crisis. 4, key matchups to watch. And finally, number 5, the Queen's Park pitch. Okay, Part 1, the ultimate test match stakes. To figure out where we're headed, we got to look back at where we just came from in Tarouba. 90. That's a huge number to keep in mind, because the West Indies just pulled off a highly clinical 90-run victory in the first test of the series. They played with immense discipline, incredible pace, and that massive win has given them so much dominant momentum heading into Sunday. So what does this all mean? Well, the stakes are literally sky-high on both sides. For the West Indies, they aren't just looking for a win. They're on the verge of a historic clean sweep. If they win here, it secures their first Test Series win over Pakistan since the year 2000. That's a really long time. Meanwhile, for Pakistan, it is a desperate must-win situation just to salvage some pride and, critically, to avoid falling to the absolute bottom of the World Test Championship standings. The historical weight of this match is just enormous. Moving on to Part 2, West Indies building a fortress. Listen to what Captain Roston Chase had to say because it perfectly captures the home team's mindset and shows this distinct cultural shift happening within West Indies cricket right now. He said, "We want to level up. We want to just come into this second test, not take anything for granted, and look to get that second victory." They aren't just content with competing at home anymore, They sat down, made a plan, and they are completely focused on making the Caribbean a true fortress. And they aren't just talking a big game either. 6. The West Indies are completely undefeated in their last 6 tests at the Queen's Park Oval. When you combine that soaring, sky-high confidence with this kind of home field dominance, it's super easy to see why they feel like they're exactly where they want to be.
All right, Part 3, Pakistan's collapse and injury crisis.
Now we've got to flip the script pretty dramatically here because for the visitors, the picture is looking significantly bleaker. 16 wickets lost for just about 100 runs. I mean, wow. It was a catastrophic batting collapse in the first test. You simply cannot win test matches when your batting order falls apart that rapidly, and it's put the entire side under just immense, crushing pressure. And man, as if that wasn't bad enough, the news got so much worse during the week. Shan Masood was basically the lone bright spot in that first test, scoring a brilliant century in the first innings. But devastatingly, he has officially been ruled out of the second test after fracturing his index finger. This leaves a massive, gaping hole in a batting lineup that we already know is incredibly fragile. So, where does that leave them? Well, it means Captain Babar Azam is now shouldering a huge burden. He's going to need some desperate support out there. Mohammad Rizwan and Salman Agha completely flopped in the first test, and they absolutely must step up. To fill the void left by Masood, Pakistan has some really tough selection decisions to make. The experienced duo of Abdullah Shafiq and Saud Shakil have been added to the squad, and they'll likely come into consideration for that vacant top-order slot. But whoever steps in, they've got to find a way to support their captain. Which brings us to Part 4, key matchups to watch. Okay, so where is this match actually going to be won and lost? Let's talk bowling, because both these teams are bringing absolute fire. For the West Indies, Jayden Seales was basically unstoppable, taking 5 wickets for just 20 runs to completely destroy Pakistan's chase in the second innings. He'll be out there hunting for wickets right alongside the veteran Kemar Roach. But remember, bowling is actually not Pakistan's problem. Mohammad Abbas bowled superbly in the last match, also taking 5 wickets in the second innings. So this bowling matchup, it's going to be incredibly tight and fiercely competitive. But the real disparity shows up when we look at the all-around form. On the West Indies side, you've got this dynamic support from players like Justin Greaves, who was named Player of the Match for a fantastic all-around performance. In stark contrast for Pakistan, Babar Azam showed tremendous fight with 58 not out in the second innings, but the guy is completely isolated out there. The West Indies are getting solid contributions from up and down the roster, while Babar is burdened with a really lonely fight for runs. And finally, Part 5, the Queen's Park pitch. You know, in cricket, the venue itself isn't just a surface, it's an active participant in the strategy. Fun fact about Queen's Park Oval before we get into the dirt, it's one of the oldest grounds in the Caribbean, having hosted tests since 1930, and it sits right against the stunning, picturesque backdrop of the Northern Range Mountains. But looking down at the actual playing surface, the crucial thing to understand is its specific micro-narrative. Queen's Park Oval is a much more traditional venue than the one they used for the first test. Reports are suggesting this pitch will offer increasing assistance to the spinners as the match goes late into the game.
And that sets up a super fascinating final tactical dilemma. A spin-friendly pitch perfectly brings Roston Chase's off-spin into play as a critical weapon for the West Indies. But here's the catch. He's been managing a finger injury of his own. He is optimistic about being fit enough to bowl by Sunday, but whether or not he can push through that injury to exploit this pitch, that could very well dictate the final hours of this entire match.
So, that leaves us with one massive question. We've got a super confident West Indies squad hungry to make history, clashing with a desperate Pakistan team that absolutely must engineer a massive turnaround. Will the West Indies secure their Caribbean fortress, or can Pakistan somehow rise from the ashes and save their championship hopes? The stakes literally couldn't be higher. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and enjoy the match.